The following is a presentation of the Championship Racing Network.
Crossed Flags, a racing podcast. It's your midweek fix for racing news and information. Brought to you by the Championship Racing Network. Now let's head trackside to join your hosts, Steve West and Matt Nicholson.
Welcome into what actually is on April Fool's Day, but I promise we will not play a joke on you. I'm Steve West, Matt Nicholson, producer John Myers, and producer Molly helping us out on this weekend, or this week's Crossed Flags, I should say. Coming up a little bit later on, we said on the big show last Saturday that we were going to do our entire Darlington Throwback grading setup this coming weekend, and we will. But Matt decided he wanted to do an honorable mention. Do keep in mind some of this could change between now and the weekend, because as we record this on Tuesday, April the 1st, April Fool's Day, there may still be some more paintings that will come out between now and Saturday morning when we actually do the big show. So based upon that, don't think this is actually even the final honorable mention. The top three from the Cup Series, top three from the Xfinity Series, we will let you know what those are come Saturday. And if the honorable mentions change, we'll let you know that too. But a little bit later on, we'll show you what we think are the ones that just missed making the top three from both Xfinity and Cup a little bit later on. First things first, got to talk about what happened at Martinsville last weekend, specifically in the Xfinity Series. And you remember in the championship race and the truck series at Phoenix when everything just seemed to go kablooey and everyone was sitting there wondering what in the heck is wrong with these guys? Guess what? Kind of had that same situation at Martinsville. If you look at it, we had 100 laps of that race run under caution.
Out of 250.
That means that the pace car led more laps than anybody else. That's sad. That used to be a joke. And we used to joke about it. Pace car led more laps than anybody else. It wasn't necessarily true, but in this case it is, and that is truly sad. There are two aspects to this that are sad, and I'm just going to touch on the first one. And I mention this only because this is something that we talked about before. You and I, Matt, and producer John. I don't think we mentioned this with producer Molly when she was, physically producing the show, the podcast. But you and I have talked about caution flag laps and how they seem to have two things that are going against them, actually. Number one, the hair trigger caution being thrown. That's obvious. But number two, they seem to be taking way, and I mean way, too much time before they go back to green.
Entirely.
So let me give you an example. Last Sunday night, I was out. My wife and one of her jobs was having a special invitation event. And I went over there for a little while and I enjoyed it, had a good time. On my way back home, it was a little bit after 7 and I tuned in Sirius XM Satellite Radio's NASCAR channel. And what should they have on but the Martinsville race from 1996, September of 1996 to be exact. And as I'm listening, it's fairly early in the race. Now, think about this for a moment, Matt. Fairly early in the race, and young Bobby Labonte is going into turn 3, and he spins. Now, today, let's go back to just last Saturday or last Sunday. That car starts to spin for Bobby Labonte. Before that car even stops spinning, NASCAR is going to throw a yellow, right?
Pretty much.
Not only did Bobby Labonte spin out, they didn't throw the caution. They stayed under green. Bobby Labonte restarted the car, and he took off. Mm-hmm. Think about that for a moment.
Oh, yeah.
The difference between 1996 and 30 years, give or take, later, is the fact that they will throw the caution for no reason whatsoever. Bobby Labonte spins out, and they stayed green and kept it going. You get one car spinning out, they'll throw the caution flag, that car will drive off. We should go green 2 laps, most. from then. Nope, they're bringing out the blowers and they're blowing off the track and they're making sure that everyone gets a chance to go into the pits. Stop it. Just stop it for the love.
Yep. That's gotta go.
All right.
Because it's becoming, like I said a few weeks ago on some things, it's becoming manufactured drama.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And here's the other side of it. And, we're going to get into it, and I'm going to do a lot of comparisons to Days of Thunder because, quite frankly, it's just appropriate. When we get into what brought out those cautions on Saturday evening, the Xfinity guys, they weren't just beating and bang. I mean, we're used to, slamming doors and, rubbins racing and all that. We've seen it. We see it at short tracks all the time, a little bit of a bump and run, that sort of thing. Man, they were ratcheting it up to 11, to borrow the phrase from Spinal Tap. I mean, they were going absolutely nuts on each other out there. And they didn't seem to care whether or not they ticked off their fellow drivers.
Unfortunately, it comes down to a sense of now the way today's age is, it's to where those boys, those boys don't have to work on their own car. They don't know how to take care of equipment because they got either daddy or grandpa's or Uncle Bob's inheritance that they could spend on getting that seat that they bought and they didn't earn.
So a lot of conversation has been going on this week about how do we fix this? And there are two ways to fix this. Brad Keselowski, for example, said that the owners need to step in and take back control of their drivers. Joey Logano, on the other hand, has said that NASCAR needs to step in and become the babysitter. Well, here's the thing. If you want NASCAR to become the babysitter, let us take you back to the movie Days of Thunder, which is a favorite reference. And truth be told, if you're watching this podcast, you probably know it, where Tom Cruise's character of Cole Trickle and Michael Rooker's character of Rowdy are called to go see Big John. Loosely.
Fred Thompson.
Yep. Fred Dalton Thompson. Loosely, of course. Not so loosely. Based upon Bill France. Bill France Jr., really, in this case. But probably a little bit of Big Bill, too, if we're really being honest. And, of course, they, play around in rental cars, go into the beach, trash the rental cars, and all that kind of stuff. But Fred Dalton Thompson as Big John looks at these two characters, to paraphrase what he had to say about them in the movie, and says, if you two want to turn yourselves into a greasy spot in a parking lot, I don't care. And I don't care what the fans say to your face. I don't think your fans care much either. So go right ahead. But you're not going to do it on my racetrack. So here's what's going to happen. You do this again, I'm going to do a Japanese inspection. And what that means is I'm going to impound your car. My guys are going to take it apart. And if your guys can put it back together in time and that car passes inspection, I might let you back on the track.
Take apart your race car for 300 laps.
There needs to be a very specifically heavy fine for stuff like what Sammy Smith did. Sammy Smith didn't try to do a bump and run on Taylor Gray. Sammy Smith was 3 car lengths back, diving into turn number 3 and rammed into Taylor Gray.
It's no different than what Austin Dillon did at Richmond last year. 1.
Or what Austin Dillon did to Eric Almirola in the Daytona 500 a few years ago.
2. If all they're gonna do is just points and a fine, that's not gonna stop anybody.
To that point, Sammy Smith. Yeah, Sammy Smith docked 50 points. Let me get this right here. Sammy Smith docked 50 points for taking out Taylor Gray, fined $25,000. It's a similar penalty a Cindric got at Coda, but less money because Xfinity, you don't make as much money in it. Also, Taylor Gray and Jeb Burton were fined $5,000 to go into the care center area to confront drivers. Read that as, Sammy Smith, among others. There's not that much of a well, let's say disincentive here to cause them to go do it again.
It's not. It's to send a message. The next person that does that at a short track, to start, you have to start from pit road. You have to be you go automatically. You serve at least a 5-lap penalty to start, and then if you get your 5 laps back, good for you.
Yeah.
If you don't, oh well.
Maybe you get lucky like Michael McDowell did, and you are able to make up 6 laps because of how the lucky dog fell, as we used to call it.
Start them in the rear. Start them in the rear.
And in a hole. And
you got to come out of the hole.
At that point in time, the owner gets ticked off and the sponsor gets ticked off. Because what is the sponsor wanting? The sponsor, I mean, I'm wearing not necessarily in honor of this. I didn't realize we were going to do this tonight. I was figuring we were going to go back to Wednesday recording, but I'm wearing kind of a throwback shirt if you hadn't noticed. This is My Boss is the Old Goat. You might remember the Chase Briscoe, Tony Stewart commercials from a couple of years ago for Mahindra Tractors, where Tony Stewart just kind of looked at him and said, "You're right, I am the goat. My boss is the old goat." They came out with this t-shirt. Couldn't resist it. Mahindra, let's go ahead and take them as the example. If this was just last year, if Mahindra happened to see their driver, Chase Briscoe, after Martinsville get to the point where he could not start the race when the race went green at Darlington the next weekend, had to sit there for 5 laps with probably very little likelihood he's going to get back on the lead lap. Could it happen? Sure. The likelihood of it, probably not. How ticked off is Mahindra?
Probably pretty high.
Okay. So now you're on warning from your sponsor. This also should tick off, continuing to use last year's example, Tony Stewart and Gene Haas. Whether or not they've got their hands fully invested in the Cup Series team or not doesn't matter. This should not make either one of the owners happy either. So one would imagine there's probably a fair warning to Chase from them. So he's got a fair warning from his 2 owners and his sponsor. That's got some teeth to it now, because NASCAR was willing to go out there and show some testicular fortitude and say, you know what? You ain't doing this again. And if you do, this 5-lap situation turns into 10. Or maybe worse, maybe we just take you out of the car. And if Tony Stewart and Gene Haas want to put somebody else in that 14 car for the next week at Bristol, that's up to them. But we may park you for the next race if you do it again. Have some teeth that actually can sink into this and make these drivers, and I don't care what level it is, Cup Series all the way down to the weekly, what used to be the Advanced Auto Parts Series. Have some teeth. Make it stick. Am I wrong?
No, they got to do something, because it's gonna. All it is, if it's points and a fine, please. That's going to do nothing.
You're not.
I guarantee. Yeah. I guarantee.
Sorry,
I can guarantee you. If it's all right, if half the field didn't get wrecked off of 4 on the last lap, coming with checkers, nothing would happen.
You're probably right.
Nothing would happen.
You're probably right. We'll talk a little bit more about
15
this.
Different cars.
It really did. We'll talk a little bit more about it during the big show coming up on Saturday as well, because there may be some more fallout from this, but we'll detail it a little bit more, and hopefully can show you some pictures of some stuff during the big show then. But speaking of pictures, let's do a little bit lighter-hearted situation. You came up with the idea that you wanted to throw out the honorable mentions here, and trucks aren't running this time around, which is kind of a shame. Would have been fun to do trucks again. But the Xfinity Cup Series running at Throwback Weekend, and you kind of hinted to it.
I'm actually glad the trucks are not running, because the trucks royally drop the ball every year on those throwbacks.
Yeah. But you noted on the big show last Saturday that, man, are the guys from the Xfinity Series just nailing these things.
They are knocking everything out of the park. I have yet to see a bad one.
Yeah, based upon what I saw, and this was not an easy thing to do. There's a lot of good ones to pick. I came up with mine, and I'm here to tell you, other than the sponsor not being the same one, it ain't a whole lot of different from what it was back then. So, producer John, let's show our viewers here on the podcast what we chose. You can see mine over there with my name just above it. That's Matt DiBenedetto's car, that number 99 Viking Motorsports car that's going to run this weekend. That's Chevrolet. So that's one problem. Obviously, when it was an Exide Batteries car under the number 99, it was Jeff Burton's Ford. So two minor problems. You go from a Ford to a Chevrolet, and you go from Viking Motorsports instead of Exide on the hood. But otherwise, as I remember that old Exide Batteries number 99 for Jeff Burton, that right there, pretty close approximation.
Yep, man. It was like I said, there have been so many good ones that have came out, especially on the Xfinity Series cars. I mean, it was almost brutal to pick.
Yeah, no doubt.
Almost brutal.
And here's the thing. Again, we're recording this on a Tuesday. There ain't no guarantee that between now and Saturday morning, when we do this again, that honorable mention for me doesn't get shoved away for something else that right now is currently in my provisional top 3.
Yeah. This one right now sets mine with the Josh Williams, Mark Martin throwback to 2007 U.S. Army car.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This one is more like a 3B for me. Almost a dead tie for my third one.
Okay. I can see that. Yeah.
My top 3, my top 2, let me rephrase that. 2 of my top 3 so far have shifted.
Yeah. And it probably will again before we get to Saturday morning.
Mine for number 1, it is an absolute runaway, and nobody has touched it yet. And I don't see it touched because when this one came out, this throwback car scheme was executed to absolute sheer perfection.
I'm going to be curious as to whether you and I choose the same one. And like I said, could change between now and Saturday morning. We'll find out. As we go from there, we move over to the Cup Series. And the Cup Series they have some interesting ones. There's a couple of really, really good ones. And then there's a couple that you're left kind of scratching your head going, really? That's what you think?
Yeah.
So Cup Series is just radically uneven in comparison to what the Xfinity Series has done so far. Now, don't get us wrong. There's a couple of really, really good ones. But at this moment in time, I can tell you my overall number 1 between Xfinity and Cup Series is coming from the Xfinity Series. Cup Series better step it up.
Oh, my best in show is Xfinity.
Yeah. And I think that probably is going to change. I don't think that's going to change. I'll be real honest with you.
I'll even tease right now.
Okay.
My top 3 as it currently stands for Xfinity is all from one team.
Ooh, yeah, I could see that.
One team.
All right, John, let's throw that first Cup Series one over there, if you don't mind. I do believe it is mine. It is. This was my choice for honorable mention. Haas Factory Team is taking that number, that 41, and they're throwing it back to the Jimmy Spencer old Target car there. And you want to talk about being able to do that pretty well. The only thing that they really missed on is something that the Xfinity Series still can do, and that's parking that number right in the middle of that door. And with the way that this number is shifted, they didn't do a bad job. I think they've got it back about as far as they can. But they did a nice job approximating the Target circle with the Haas circle. And this one happens to be your honorable mention as well, huh, Matt?
Yes, and as a disclaimer, these honorable mention picks are sight unseen. We're just not seeing these now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It was mine as well.
Yeah. We had not talked about this beforehand. So, heck, it was an hour ago, I guess, as we are looking at the time that we actually mentioned that we wanted to do the honorable mention right now on this particular podcast.
And
So again,
and as it stands right now, currently, one of my Cup top threes is within a name of a series of drivers that I'm not very fond of. But they got this throwback right. They got it right.
some of them are finally doing this stuff right, and thankfully that they are. So yeah, this is going to be fun. We'll again have our top 3 for the Xfinity, top 3 for the Cup Series, and the overall number 1 coming up this weekend. And we'll let you know if the honorable mention does change, because again, I get the funny feeling it will. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday specifically. And we'll send the pictures out to John as soon as we can, because John is that guy, and we appreciate all the hard work that he did on setting up those pictures so that you guys could see them here. Does a fantastic job of it. We appreciate his hard work and his effort in doing all that stuff. So it's going to be a busy weekend for him when it comes to those pictures. So I'll try and be nice to him about all the other pictures throughout the course of the show. But in the meantime, yeah, I do think it'll change. I do like that 41, but I'm not going to say that I'm sold that that is the 3B or even a number 4. That could be eclipsed. But as we said, Cup Series teams, you need to step it up. The Xfinity Series are eating you for lunch right now, boys and girls. Get it fixed, would you?
That they are. That they are.
All right. Anything else that you wanted to mention?
I'm good.
All right. Formula One back in action this weekend in Japan. We'll show you a couple of alternate paint schemes that are going, a couple of teams are going to be using in Japan. Plus, we're going to talk about something that NASCAR has never really technically had, at least by name, but yet they decided to institute it for whatever purpose. So we got that and so much more coming up on the big show. Don't forget about it. CRN Live on YouTube, 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central Time. Join us then. And hopefully you'll be able to subscribe right down below. And it doesn't matter whether you're on CRN Live on YouTube. Tell all your friends, your neighbors, and hell, yell it out in the street and tell people you don't even know. Or whether you're talking about it on Jocks FM TV. We appreciate them and all their support as well. And we'll talk to you Saturday morning on CRN The Big Show.
You've been listening to Crossed Flags, a racing podcast. For more content like this, subscribe to CRN Live on YouTube, and you'll be set to catch the 2-hour live show every Saturday morning at 9 Eastern, 8 Central.
This has been a presentation of the Championship Racing Network.